I have some splaining to do. Hopefully the microphone is working and everything's good. It looks like it's good. Hello, 1968. You're always here. Hello, Carl. Yeah, it's a little bit of a late stream, I guess. I've been kind of I've been isolating myself all day. I'm trying to be alone for the whole day, not talk to anyone in real life. Because I don't know, it just got off. My day got off on the wrong start, the wrong foot, and I'm like, I'm not recovering from this. I'm gonna hope that tomorrow's better. I just did an OBS recording of part of an earlier stream that I did. So I'll edit that down into a clip from my channel. It's the other tick history video that I reviewed. And speaking of which, I added something to the playlist, which is a critique of tick history. This is the only one I've found, I think, aside from mine. There might be others, but this one is a pretty big one. It's got over 200,000 views. And it's this guy criticizing tick history. So I'm interested in seeing what he has to say, because I don't know what other crazy cringe stuff this guy has said in the past, because he's made so many videos. Tick history has so many videos, even just ones that are about political philosophy, like just him totally failing to understand political philosophy. He has so many of them. Besides the ones he makes about tanks and stuff, which I've never really been interested in that aspect of history. I've never really liked the kind of practical weapon war kind of history. It's funny. I think there's a lot of boys and men who, it seems like, they're not interested in history except for World War II. What is it about World War II specifically? Like, I remember in high school there was a boy who was talking, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm not into history except for World War II." I don't know. I've always been way more interested in, like, political history, philosophical history, stuff like that. I'm not super into the battles and the guns and how all that works, logistics. But I have watched several YouTubers who are into that, like Lindy Beige, for instance, is big into the whole sort of ground level history, like how people actually lived, and specifically how people fought battles and stuff. The weapons they used. Not really my area. But it seems to be this guy's area, and I think he should stick to that area instead of trying to do what I do, because he sucks at doing what I do. But let's just see what this person has to say. Freda.
The beginning of this video is going to seem a bit mean and like we're just arguing definitions, but I assure you it's going to be important groundwork for the remainder of the video, so please stay tuned. This video goes to some insane places that I did not expect it to go. It's a small world, I'll put it like that.
Something that's publicly traded is publicly owned. Let's take Amazon as an example. This is a history channel, not a make-believe political fiction channel.
He referenced the Joe Rogan Experience episode 1757. Yeah. Holy sh**.
I mean, this publicly traded equals publicly owned. I mean, technically, kind of, yeah, but it's a, like, there's different. It's not public ownership in the sense of in the sense of like a nationalized industry. But I just like what point is he even trying to make with that? That's the big. Sometimes Tick History says stuff that's just so bafflingly pointless. Because even if, okay, yeah, definitionally, you can say that publicly traded companies are publicly owned. It doesn't change anything. It's meaningless.
I have to stick with the history, not what you or I might mistakenly believe.
I just now noticed something really fun. That's my professor.
You're wrong if you think socialism is anything other than state ownership or control of the means of production. It's not when two workers hold a hammer or when two girls share one cup. Except, I'm not a member of society. Democracy is a lie, it's snake oil. The red pill is waking up from the Matrix and seeing the world for as it really is.
This guy just gets weirder and weirder and weirder the more I watch
That's
him.
what you need to do now. And the Reich even abolished private property. All of this killed small businesses, small companies.
Yeah, the Reich didn't abolish private property, but like there are ways in which you can weasel into this kind of worldview. Like, okay, the Reich made it so that like there's no separation between the individual and the state. Therefore, the state has all rights, and the individual only has rights within the state. And so, technically, the individual, whatever the individual owns, is actually owned by the state because the two are inseparable. Like, you would have to jump through some crazy semantical loopholes to get to this conclusion, and then at the end of it, you've said nothing that actually changes anything. Like, how, like, the kind of person who can watch a video like this and actually have their mind changed, like, I never thought about it like that, must be a complete idiot.
The Jews and prices.
This is insane.
Just wake up.
Wake up, America.
Tick or Tick History is a history YouTuber who has made some genuinely good and informative videos in the past on World War II and military history. Or so I thought. Turns out that even his best videos have a lot of problems, and I did not become aware of this until something like 5 years ago. I'm talking about Tick's numerous videos on the ideology of Adolf Hitler. Tick at some point became convinced that Hitler and the rest of the Nazis were genuine socialists. And he uses very simplistic libertarian ideological terms and analysis to come to this conclusion. It started with a 20-minute video.
Yeah, libertarianism in general is very simplistic, I've found. It's like the ideology you adopt if you don't want to have to actually plan anything out. You don't want to have to actually, like, organize society in a way that's beneficial for anyone. It's just like, yeah, just fuck it. Simplify. just like, no effort put into anything. That's libertarianism, basically. When you get right down to it, it's just like the laziest politics ever.
Got a lot of criticism for that one, and as a result, he doubled down. Several times. One of his videos, responding to the counter-arguments against his initial claim, is 5 hours long. That is never a good sign. His first video on the topic came out on August 13th, 2018, and was titled, quote, National Socialism Was Socialism. It's a bit
And
structurally
this is the
confusing,
one I
with a lot of
reviewed.
his arguments relying on ideological assumptions that seek to equate Nazism and Marxist socialism, while simultaneously differentiating them based on the idea that they are unique variants of socialism within a spectrum of socialism. Essentially, he's improvisationally constructing a new framework for understanding socialism, whereby the
Yeah, and I kind of like the idea of having a broad enough tent with terms that you can include many different things under those terms, because I think it helps us loosen up a bit when we're dealing with semantics. Because I think part of the issue with the way we talk about subjects like history and politics is that we get too caught up in semantics and waste our time when really they don't matter, because what you call something doesn't actually impact what it is. And people, I think we're so word brained that we kind of are under this illusion that words are real life, or that the thing that what we call something affects what it is, or something like that. I don't know. It's a very strange thought process, but it's so easy to kind of slip into that and forget that it doesn't matter. So, with this sort of thing, I like to be as broad as possible. So I don't know if I'm going to agree with this person's critique on this specific issue, but let's see.
The Nazi ideology will fit alongside Marxism. This is something he does with a lot of things, and it very quickly gets out of control. Sources for books will be cited to the page number, articles will be cited to the article itself, and videos will be cited to the second mark where the thing I'm discussing appears. Tick is a very interesting subject for a video like this because on the surface it may seem like Tick does everything that I usually ask history creators to do. He reads any cite sources on screen down to the page number, even when he says something insane like this.
There was
and it's funny because he'll put a source on screen that contradicts what he's saying about what it's saying. Like, he put that thing that where Hitler was talking to Strasser about how he doesn't believe in state socialism. Like, he doesn't believe in socializing industry because he wants to socialize the people, which basically means make the people believe in this sort of hyper-nationalist ideology that says that they're all special because they have white skin, and that they all should work together under his leadership for the betterment of Germany. And that once you do that, and get rid of any inferiors that are holding them back, or like inferior subversive elements and subversive ideas and behaviors. Like, if he can propagandize the people sufficiently, then he has no need of actually putting capital in the hands of the workers or in the hands of the government, because he'll have a nation that's all kind of behind the government anyway. And so he's basically saying we can do socialism without the socialism, and then Tick History's interpretation of that is that Hitler is saying that his socialism is the same as the Soviet Union's model of socialism, basically, even though that's like the exact opposite of what he said. So sometimes Tick will do that, where he'll just straight up lie about stuff that he's showing you, so you can actually see on screen that he's lying. I don't know why people are this just incompetent at analysis. Like, if you are reading this material, don't you want to do your best to understand it? Oh, I smudged a little bit, I think. Let me look in the mirror. No, I think I'm good. I got some on my finger, though. I saw your AVGN and Doug Walker videos. They're great. Good. Yeah, I think those turned out pretty good. The Doug Walker one is a little bit, it's like, were you there? How do you know? Were you there? And I make fun of it at the beginning of the nerd one.
Split in the heavens,
But
and
it's-
from this
it's a
split you
decent
get
video.
shards of the true God cast into the ether. The demiurge, the devil, then creates the material realm, this world we inhabit, as a prison for the shards of the true God. So if you think about the Matrix,
To give you some context here, Tick's talking about Gnostic mysticism here, a thing one of Altist also
God,
brought up
yeah.
when talking about socialism. I still don't know too much about it, so I'll refer you to Veritas at Caritas, who's currently making 3 videos on Tick and Gnosticism. One of these videos will be covering something that I'm not covering in much detail, and that is Tick's tactical use of word salad. So if that sounds interesting, go subscribe. And by the time you're watching this, at least one of Veritas's videos should be out. I'll link his community post critiquing Tick's commentary on Gnosticism based on his dubious source selection and lack of engagement with
Yeah,
the
I've
historiography
heard
of
that
the
Tick
topic.
does not
This too will
understand
be a recurring
Gnosticism,
theme.
but
Like the
again,
What About
just
This video, I've sprinkled in a few
insists on
fun
talking
things
about
from
it as if
private
he
recordings
understands
and
it.
a live stream. Which means that you're going to get a few more earnest initial reactions to some insane stuff that I notice, and you're going to notice my slow declining sanity.
capitalism is a dirty word.
When you construct a definition, you're not just observing, you're imparting a part of what you believe onto that definition. This can be based on evidence, debate, and so on, but it can also be based on vibes. There's no easy way to break up Tick's explanation of terms, and you'll see why in just a moment. So while I wanted to tackle capitalism, and then socialism, then the public sector, and then the
What's he
private sector,
saying?
and so on, that
Vibes,
isn't going to be possible
definitions?
here.
Public sector is the state. I explained what the public sector was, a societal hierarchy, or a hierarchy of society. I explained that there were numerous synonyms for this structure, from a group to a nation to a society to a public to a worker collective, etc. We can confirm this is the case in reality by simply thinking about a tribe.
Of course, you can't simply confirm that something is the case in reality by just, quote, thinking about it. Otherwise, why do your videos carry citations? By rationalizing your way towards a conception of reality independently of evidence, you essentially reject reality itself. This is where empirical evidence is supposed to come in. Were Tick to utilize an actually existing example, we could interrogate the veracity of his claims as they relate to the evidence. While he's clearly simplifying in
I think we're kind of jumping the gun here, because I don't know if what he's criticizing has been properly laid out and explained yet. Like I'm still not sure what he's talking about.
order to illustrate a point, doing so while he's rejecting existing definitions and historiography on a
Like, from what I understand, the public sector refers specifically to the state. But in this diagram, he has state at the top of this pyramid, and most of the pyramid is the public sector. No, the public sector is the state. That's usually how the term is used. I've never heard the term public sector used for anything other than state. And then private sector is at the bottom of this whack pyramid. And then within this public sector thing, we have the public sector, nation, society, social group, collective, common, commune, group, the state. How is the private sector not a part of this? Like, nation, what, the private sector isn't part of the nation? Private sector isn't part of society or social groups? I don't understand what this diagram is supposed to mean, and I wish that Freda had even, like, just let Tick even explain this so that I could have some context for what we're talking about.
on a subject makes it seem to me like he's trying to trick you into gobbling up your ideology. The underlying premise that all of these aforementioned concepts
Hold on. We have comments. I know that barely anyone likes Doug Walker's take on the wall. I got a mixed feeling on it. Hell, I even remixed/extended the video and the album. But the vocals and writing is just a bit bad. Oh, you think? I don't know. Like, I didn't think there was anything really entertaining about that video. I mean, some of the animations at the end were cool, but it was weird because they were like characters that already existed that this 3D model animator guy who Doug liked made was already like making videos with, and so it was like a weird crossover with them, and most people hadn't even heard of them, and so it was like, who are these characters? It was very confusing. I don't, yeah, I don't think that video was well thought out, and I think that Doug probably should have realized that the problems with it already, like making this big long parody where you're like forcing criticisms of what's a decent movie that you admit at the end that you like, but you're making this whole big long parody where like you're making all these criticisms that you don't even seem to believe in. Like, I don't know. Maybe we should back up just a bit. This guy's moving a little quick. I don't think backing up will help us, because I don't think we've missed anything. I just think he's jumping the gun. But I'll back up 5 seconds because I think he was beginning to explain things a little bit better.
Like he's trying to trick you into gobbling up your ideology. The underlying premise that all of these aforementioned concepts, such as the nation, the public, the social group, the collective, the common, and so on, are the same thing, and all are, quote, the state, brings these words into a complicated pattern of circular logic, obfuscating their true meanings. These are all unique concepts meant to be applied in specific contexts and understood in specific ways. Some of these...
So, but that's not what this diagram looks like. This diagram looks like state is at the top of this pyramid called the public sector, and then private sector is at the bottom of it for some reason. I don't know why that's even there. And then all these terms are like included within it. It still doesn't make any sense. But yeah, I wish that he had given Tick some time to explain what this diagram was before he starts criticizing it.
Terms are used to mediate between other terms, to give you a better understanding of them. For example, a state does rely on some sort of social organization. Without understanding the latter, you have trouble understanding the former. Society represents a collective of many instances of social organization, such as families, friend groups, professional organizations, social hierarchies, and so on. All these terms build upon one another to give you ways to contextualize the individual terms. Not everything that's collective is the state, not everything that's social is society, and not everything that involves a group is all of the aforementioned things. By conflating these things, by linking them together in a system of circular logic, you achieve only a total breakdown in knowledge and the understanding of these individual concepts on their own terms. Let me emphasize again, these terms are meant to be understood individually, and then understood in relation to one another, not as synonymous with one another. I struggle to find any other way to characterize this sort of breakdown of fundamental intellectual methodology.
If this is indeed what Tick was doing with this diagram, then Tick is beyond stupid. This is an incompetent human being. If that is what he was doing with this diagram, then Tick just should like log off the internet forever and go back to school. Seriously, like whatever degree he got in school, he should get that degree again, because he clearly has forgotten fucking everything that he learned.
All of the aforementioned things.
By that is
these
pathetic.
Things, by linking
that
them
is
together
really
in these individual
unforgivable
concepts on their own terms.
If he's actually trying to say that all these things mean the same thing in political philosophy, that's like an unforgivable offense.
Let me emphasize
again. His
again.
credibility should be damaged forever.
These terms are meant to be understood individually, and then understood in relation to one another, not as synonymous with one another. I struggle to find any other way to characterize this sort of breakdown of fundamental intellectual methodology than simple insanity. That's not me saying that Tick is insane. I'm saying that what he's doing is insane. Though I will call him insane later on.
That's what society says. I didn't make it up, nor do I necessarily agree, but that's what I've got to say, because history is a praxeology, a study of human action. If humans have acted and defined something as X, then I can't say it's Z, I have to say society thinks it's X, even if I know it's Z.
Here Tick says history is a, quote, praxeology, a term he no doubt learned from Ludwig von Mises, as he cites him quite often, and it's a foundational part of how Mises analyzes economics. Praxeology is a philosophical methodology that, according to Murray Rothbard,
Mises also used the word pleonastic in the last Tick history video I reviewed. I don't know what that word means either. So Words that begin with the letter P that I don't know is becoming a common pattern with Ludwig von Mises. But let's hear about Murray Rothbard.
Underpinned the early Austrian school of economics, but has since fallen out of use. Tick cites Rothbard as an inspiration for his political outlook. The idea of praxeology is to rationalize your way towards a logic of human action, independently of variables within their present circumstances. The goal was to construct a universal logic of human action that you could apply everywhere.
Rational logic. All right, hold on. By the way, I was distracted for a second. Bow ties, I just don't like them. I'm just gonna be real. Not a fan of the bow tie. I'm not really a fan of the necktie, period. I mean, it plays an important role, I guess, in filling out the three-piece suit. I kind of think, though, that we've kind of neglected the four-piece suit lately. Like, what happened to the waistcoat? I think the waistcoat was kind of an important part of the picture. But yeah, the bow tie, it's... I don't really agree with it. Like on this guy, I always just thought it looked silly. Like, doesn't this guy look silly wearing this bow tie? I don't know.
Praxeology is to rationalize your way towards a logic of human action, independently of variables within their present circumstances. The goal was to construct a universal logic of human action that you could apply everywhere. The core of praxeology is that people have goals and act to attain them. This is fundamentally different from history, which is all about analyzing the circumstances under which action was taken in the past. History uses evidence created after the fact.
I'm sorry, I have to watch that again because this is so abstract. Okay,
towards a logic of human action, independently of variables within their present circumstances. The goal was to construct a universal logic of human action that you could apply everywhere. The core of praxeology is that people have goals and act to attain them. This is fundamentally different from history, which is all about analyzing the circumstances under which action was...
Yeah, anytime you talk about creating a universal law of human anything, like laws are stuff like physics. You know, you can always determine the rate at which a ball is going to drop based on how high up it is, how dense it is, how windy it is. Like, you can figure out based on certain immutable laws of nature how a thing is going to happen. Whenever you start applying that to human anything, like human behavior, human morality, whatever, it breaks down immediately. So I don't know, this praxeology thing is already seeming sus to me.
Was taken in the past. History uses evidence created after the fact in order to back up its arguments. Praxeology uses arguments to back up its arguments. It's why Tick says, quote, think about a tribe, instead of pointing to evidence relating to a tribe that exists or has existed. Ludwig von Mises himself, in his book Human Action, describes history and praxeology as two different things. Quote, there are two main branches of the sciences of human action, praxeology and history. Rothbard says that history differs from praxeology in that, quote, history deals with ends adopted in the past, what means were used to achieve them, and what the consequences of these actions were. I don't know why he describes history in this way, when it doesn't conform to the ideas of his libertarian heroes or the ideas one would find in your average book on the study of the field of history. I assume he's read a few of them because 5 good ones appear on his bibliography list. I also wish that he would take his own advice and use the actual commonly agreed upon definition of words. And speaking of which, let's return to Tick's tribe.
It doesn't matter what form of governance, if any, the tribe has, be it democratic, priestly, or a monarchy, the fact is that the tribe itself is a tribal state.
The usage of the word tribe...
Well, you don't even have to have an actual government for a tribe. Like the Indian tribes of Nevada didn't have a concept of government. They didn't actually have any kind of real estate that you can look at. They had elders who they would talk to and consult about stuff. They had shamans who would help them figure stuff out and maybe solve conflicts between them, but they didn't have any kind of formalized structure that we could call a government. So, like, are we going to call that a government even though, like, there's no real structure that exists that you can identify? Is just people agreeing to get along with each other a government? Like, I feel like you have to kind of really you have to kind of stretch things a bit to say that all groups or all societies have a government. And but I don't know what point that he's leading to with this, because usually Tick doesn't have like unmotivated points that he makes. Like, everything he says is to propagandize about something. So I don't know where this is leading him, but yeah.
Also confuses things. This is a term that's been used to describe pre-modern, pre-colonial, pre-capitalist, and pre-state forms of social organization. It's also a legal term used in certain jurisdictions like the...
Yeah, pre-state. Exactly. Pleonastic, a meaningless subject or word that bears no thematic role. A redundant phrase or word and concept. Okay. I'd have to get used to using that for it to lock into my head. Are hunter-gatherer bands governments? Yeah, I don't really see that, because if there's no actual institution in place that monopolizes violence for the goal of creating civil harmony, then what does government really mean at that point? I think you can definitely make the point that you can have a society without government, and that would kind of validate a little bit of what the anarchists are talking about. Although I'm not sure that you can really have an anarchist society that like has already gone through all of the evolution that our society has gone into. I don't think you can like then turn that into a stateless society. That seems like impossible to me.
United States. In 1975, anthropologist Morton Freed asked, quote, "Do tribes exist, or are they chimeras, imaginary compounds of various and, at times, incongruous social illusions fabricated for diverse reasons?" Cultural anthropologist Elizabeth Colson in 1986 said, quote, "I do not know what is meant by tribal societies. Tribe and tribal are slippery terms despite various attempts to pin them down so that they could be used analytically. Tribe has been used with reference to the whole span of human groups, with perhaps the exception of the nuclear family. The quote tribe is an imprecise term to which we prescribe various meanings, which means that when Tick says, quote, think about a tribe, you are not thinking about the same thing. And to make matters worse, going by common usage, nothing like a quote...
Yeah, that's a really kind of silly thing to say. Think about a tribe. What tribe? What kind of tribe? Just a tribe? Okay. It could be like anything, okay?
Tribal state exists. The term has historically been applied to peoples living under what was perceived as more fragmentary forms of social organization, by peoples living under more complex forms of social organization which were characterized as states. In other words, this is a word employed by the residents in a state to categorize residents in a stateless form of social organization. Note how he says it does not matter if there is any form of governance in the tribe. One of the foundational definitions of the state in the way that we use the term in the modern day comes from Max Weber, who defines it as a human community that successfully claims the monopoly of the legitimate use of physical force within a given community. And politics, according to Weber, is striving to share power or to influence the distribution of power, either among states or among groups within a state. Most definitions tend to operate along similar lines, emphasizing governance and the capacity to wield authority. Here's another one by Charles Tilley,
Yeah,
who says, quote,
basically.
"Let us define states as coercion-wielding organizations that are distinct from households and kinship groups and exercise clear priority in some respects over all other organizations within substantial territories. The term includes city-states, empires, theocracies, and many other forms of government, but excludes tribes, lineages, firms, and churches as such." He doesn't seem to cite any genuine works on the state itself.
Yeah, I don't know why it excludes tribes. Like, what does tribe mean in that context? Yeah, I mean, I think generally, I mean, what is a state? It's this kind of vague idea, but it essentially amounts to a monopoly on violence and a sort of justification of that monopoly on the grounds that it's the only legitimate practitioner of that kind of violence.
All of this is improvisationally constructed based on his own rationalizations. Like Kraut, who cites liberal political theorists and pop history instead of authorities on these subjects, Tick cites political theorists now associated with the right-wing libertarian sphere of politics, like Ludwig von Mises, and also Tim Pool for some reason. Even Ludwig von Mises
did?
doesn't agree with Tick.
Did he cite Tim Pool? When did that happen? But yeah, this is a thing where people sometimes will like, because you know he's Tick cited Mises when talking about how state socialism is a pleonastic term, and I remember I raged at him for that because Mises is not a socialist theorist. Mises was an Austrian economist. Economics was his specialty. And I highly doubt that Mises ever even took socialism seriously enough to actually study it the way a real theorist would. Like Vladimir Lenin, which is why I suggested maybe he should have used the quote from Lenin to say the same point that he was trying to make. Because it seemed like Lenin, you could have found a Lenin quote that said the same thing. But yeah, this whole phenomenon, sometimes people will like cite just bullshit and then be like, see, the bullshit agrees with me. Like, okay, am I supposed to be impressed by that? Like there's this terrible YouTuber named Son of Tiamat who made this garbage video about fascism that I reviewed it in a comment under that video a long time ago before I was streaming. So I haven't reacted to it on stream just because I saw it a long time ago. But he cited that guy who wrote that book called Liberal Fascism with the smiley face and the Hitler mustache that you might have seen. And it's like, why is he not embarrassed to be citing that? Like, it's so clearly a work of pop history propaganda. Like I would never cite something like that. I would never cite some bullshit like this, you know? Like, this is not a real book. This is not a real source of information. This is just some dumb fuck's opinion. Like, that's like citing my video as a source. Like, really? I mean, there's functionally no difference between citing a video that I made and citing like a book like that, you know?
Tick's permissive definition of the state, saying that not every apparatus of compulsion and coercion is a state, that it requires the concepts of state territory and sovereignty, which pretty much every definition of the state agrees with. Tick doesn't cite this particular work of Mises, instead preferring his polemics against socialism, which is a tendency Tick often tends to gravitate towards with his source selection. In his video Public versus Private, in which he attempts to explain these terms, very few so-called neutral academic works on the state, on private property, or on the innate...
I have been curious about this video in particular, because it's long, and so I haven't wanted to watch it on stream just because it's so long. But I can't imagine what kind of a train wreck this video is, because that was a big criticism that people offered on his Hitler video. It was like, you don't understand what socialism is, and you think that, like, all socialism is state socialism for one thing, and you don't understand the difference between private property and public property. You don't understand how, like, private property kind of negates the whole idea that you're pushing, that Hitler's and Stalin's economics are basically the same. And so he makes this hour and 42-minute video about this topic. I can't imagine what ways he just acrobatically bends over backwards to just double down on his stupidity. I am terrified of the existence of this video. So hopefully this Freda video will kind of alleviate a bit of that curiosity for me.
Nature of the public are utilized. I say so-called because no academic work which discusses politics can ever truly consider itself neutral due to having been created by a political being existing in a political context, but works can aspire to be neutral. In this video's bibliography, there is something like 5 polemics against socialism and 2 books by contemporary conservative political activist Thomas Sowell. If I was to make a video on the state, my first choice would not be to cite Vladimir Lenin or Karl Marx. There are also a lot of primary source works by fascist authors, who I think most of us can agree did not necessarily have the most academically sound ideas. There's nothing wrong with citing these primary sources, but, and I say this to anyone who aspires to work with history on YouTube, you are not the university. There are probably people out there at academic institutions with long careers analyzing these issues who are doing a much better job of this than you are. Try as best as you can to rely on secondary sources written by experts on these topics. There is nothing impressive about leaning heavily on primary sources. Analysis of these primary sources comes through secondary sources.
When you interact with primary sources, you are often formulating original research. YouTube is a bad place for this. Yeah, secondary sources will give you context for understanding primary sources, for sure. But I think that primary sources are a great way to understand history, as long as you don't make assumptions while you're reading them. That's the problem, is that people will just, like, read something and then, like, think, oh, I guess that probably means this, and then they'll form some understanding that's not really accurate. But I found, reading primary sources, going straight to the source, was a great way of figuring out the study of fascism, specifically, when it seemed like the secondary sources I was reading just weren't really explaining it in a way that made sense. Actually reading the real sources kind of explained at least the philosophy aspect of it in a way that made sense.
You can aspire to add something novel to the conversation, but most of the time, the best you're going to be able to do is communicate what's being produced by these scholars. It seems to me that Tick is unable to disconnect the state as an academic concept from the state as a pejorative or ideological signifier. To understand Tick's understanding of capitalism, you have to understand his definition of private enterprise and the private sector. Tick believes that Amazon is a part of the public sector of the economy because
something that's publicly traded is publicly owned.
God, that is stupid. Because that's just not in any way how the word public sector is used. So he's just fabricating a definition of a term for no reason. He doesn't have to do that, but he's like, I'm just gonna do it anyway. But as if it changes. He's basically trying to change reality with words. Use semantics. It's like he thinks that semantics have some voodoo power to change what exists into something that fits more what he wants it to be. What a psychotic, insane approach to analysis. Like, the more I learn about this guy, the crazier he seems.
Let's take Amazon as an example.
A corporation being publicly traded means that its shares can be bought and sold by anyone, and that anyone who owns a share has a proportional say in the running of the company. The fact that anyone can own a share doesn't mean that everyone does. According to Tick, large corporations are not private enterprise and not a part of the private sector. This is because Tick views the private sector exclusively as a thing relating to individuals, with some leeway given to certain small businesses. Though I couldn't find an example
Very
clearly
dumb.
demarcating when a small business becomes too big to be, quote, private. This is because Tick has a fundamentally egotistical worldview, and I'm using that word in a descriptive fashion, not as a pejorative. Tick views social organization of any kind as its own sphere of politics, a, quote, public sector. Community and social organization is something entirely separate from him as an individual, and not something he wants any part in. He is only himself, and his relationship to the world around him is analyzed more or less exclusively in the ways that the world around him infringes on him.
They say that the state is society, and because I'm a member of society, therefore I have to contribute to society. Except, I'm not a member of society.
He's saying this because society to him is, quote, the state, and the state is an organism existing as its own thing, living on its own.
Yeah, saying you are not a member of society when you're living in a house or an apartment that was built by other people, and you're lighting that house or apartment with energy produced by other people, you're eating food that was produced by other people, drinking and bathing in water that was channeled into your home by other people. You went to a higher education system where you, by the way, passed with a grade of, I think, what was it, C-, which is entirely run by other people. You make your money that you use to afford all of these aforementioned expenses by working with other people. And you are somehow not a part of society. You are somehow not related in any way to other people. Like, I don't know how fucking brain rotted you can possibly, like, how more brain rotted could you possibly be as a libertarian? Like, this is hardcore libertarian brain rot. This is when, like, libertarianism just takes over the fucking brain like the symbiote from Spider-Man and just turns it into a pile of fucking mush. Like, this is just absurd. I cannot believe.
Separate from the will or influence of individuals. He simultaneously considers himself a product of the state when he calls teachers the minions of the state and the education system the miseducation system, but he can't recognize that he, as well as everything around him in the shot, fits within and is a product of a social context, a social organization, a society. This is what I mean when I say that he has an egotistical worldview. It's not a pejorative, I'm using it descriptively. To him, a business is no longer owned by individuals when it becomes a firm in which multiple people own shares, even if that's just multiple private individuals. If there isn't sole individual dictatorial control of a business, it is no longer private in Tick's eyes. And once there are multiple people involved in decision-making, it is socialism. Perhaps it should come as no surprise that Tick's main gripe with Ludwig von Mises is that
democracy is a lie, it's snake oil. And this is where I disagree with Mises, who was pro-democratic, at least in his early years.
Let's return briefly to Amazon.com.
The general public, who are usually individual investors, hold a 30% stake in Amazon.com. While this group can't necessarily call the shots, it can certainly have a real influence on how the...
I would like to review this video. Tick's definitions are wrong about socialism and capitalism. It seems like this is a juicy one that he's pulling from here.
Run. This is shared ownership of the means of production.
What the fuck? What?
This is public ownership of the means of production. This is worker ownership of the means of production.
Yep. Yeah.
It's precisely what the socialists are calling for. There's a reason why there was a cartoon in the 1800s.
Okay. That's it. I'm watching this video. Because I want to see this straight from the source, just how ludicrous this is. Let's go. How long is it? Only 45 minutes? Perfect. It's half as long as the other one that I was intimidated by. Let's do this. Let's trash the ever-loving shit out of what is obviously going to be an absolutely terrible video. I can't wait.
History lies in the heart of the debate, and the debate rages regarding simple things like what the definition of certain words are. I made a video a few years ago defining the historical definition.
Simple things that still somehow this guy cannot fucking grasp for his life. Like, the self-own here is incredible. Into the freaking vortex we go.
Definitions of socialism and capitalism. Despite using multiple sources, from primary sources to history books to the Oxford English Dictionary, apparently my definitions are wrong, and I've received a lot of criticism.
But you don't use definitions from the Oxford English Dictionary. If you did that, we wouldn't be complaining. Let me look up Oxford English Dictionary definitions of socialism and capitalism, shall we? I mean, like, if you were actually doing that, nobody would have a problem with it. OED definition dictionaries. Yeah, let's go. OED dictionary. Just once. Opening up on my phone. The OED. Capitalism. The practice. All right, view entry. Can't I just see meaning and use? There we go. Oh, I can't access it? Damn it. OED made it seem like I was going to be able to just, like, access their definition, but then they're like, psych! Let me see if I can find it elsewhere. Okay, this is Oxford Reference. An economic system in which the factors of production are privately owned and individual owners of capital are free to make use of it as they see fit, in particular for their own profit. So, yeah, basically, like, in order to get to Tick's interpretation of capitalism, you have to say that a company being publicly traded means that its stocks are somehow not privately owned, even though if you buy a stock, you own it, but somehow that's not your property. So, yeah. Like, if he were actually using real definitions, nobody would have an issue. It's just the fact that he lies that people have a problem with.
Criticism over the past 3 years for supposedly misleading people and not admitting my mistakes. Well, I've held off from addressing this specific criticism for 3 years, simply because it's not been a priority. But today, I want to tackle the major counter-arguments I've received and confirm that the historical definitions of socialism and capitalism are what history says they are, not what postmodern political ideologues believe they are. I'm going to start off this video by clarifying what
history says they are. I mean, it's not even really the domain of history. It's just the domain of, like, what do you even call it? Like, people who write dictionaries. What do you call those people? Editors, dictionary editors. Like, it's their domain to be able to define the way words have been used over time, to synthesize that into a definition that can really account for the way that people for what people are referring to when they use certain words. So what Tick does is he like doesn't go by just the way the words are typically used, what people typically mean when they use them. He creates these weird semantical traps to, like, change the meaning into something else that more suits what he wants. And then I guess he justifies that by saying it's historical.
Did and didn't say. In response to a recent poll on my channel where the majority of my viewers have said I should talk about politics and economics, which goes against the very vocal minority saying I should stick to tanks, Horatio Pelagius said this: I recently unsubscribed to you, so I'm not sure why this poll has been shown to me, but your political and economic opinions are completely ludicrous, and you don't understand the very basics of the political theory you discuss. Your historical analysis, despite this, is pretty good, and the production quality of your videos is excellent. You do an excellent job presenting them as well. Stick to tanks so I can
Yeah, his presentation is not bad.
Subscribe again and actually enjoy and learn from you. I bring this comment up specifically because it expresses an extremely common view, often repeated by those who dislike what I've said with regards to socialism. He's not the only one to say this sort of thing, but is one of the more pleasant to read examples. When pressed, Horatio then responded, I do take issues with Tick's definitions of socialism because he defines almost literally everything as socialism. It's highly likely you believe in many things that are in fact socialism according to Tick, and are also a socialist as far as he's concerned. Again, this is a very common criticism of my work, but is it true? Did I really say that everything is socialism?
Well, clearly, yeah, because, like, that clip that Freda played from this video, I'm pretty sure it was this video, was Tick saying that like a publicly traded company is socialism. So yeah, I mean, maybe by the letter, like the exact literal interpretation of those words, he doesn't think that everything is socialism, but yeah, he clearly is using the term incorrectly.
Or did I say something else? Well, in my public versus private video, I explained that the public sector is the state. I explained what the...
So the state and these are the same thing, okay, according to him.
Public sector what?
And the public sector is the state. I agree with that.
Was a societal hierarchy, or a hierarchy of society. I explained that
the term public sector is used to talk about who's financing projects. So if projects are financed by private investors for either gain, like profit, or for just their own purposes, then they're part of the private sector. If they're financed by the state, then they are part of the public sector, because it's public tax money that's being funneled into these projects. the term public sector doesn't have anything to do with hierarchy. That is more what the term state is about. So the public sector is included in the state. It's one of the state's sort of attributes. But like this idea of hierarchy doesn't really describe what this term public sector is about.
Numerous synonyms for this structure, from a group to a nation to a society to a public to a worker collective, etc. We can confirm this is the case in reality by simply thinking.
Yeah, but these terms don't all describe state. Like, a nation can be a thing that exists without a state. For instance, the Jewish nation was a thing that people conceived of before the modern nation state of Israel ever existed. And the Zionist project was the idea of giving a nation state to the already extant nation of Israel, which they believed was extant despite the non-existence of the nation state. A social group is not a state. Like my study group for Spanish class is a social group. That's not a state. So these terms don't all fall into, they're not like, he's making a point that like all these terms and this term and this term are all the same thing. But why is he making this point? Like, where did he get this idea? I don't know.
We can confirm this is the case in reality by simply thinking about a tribe. Each hut in the tribe is a
Thinking about a tribe. Let's do it.
private abode, but collectively we'd say that this is a tribal state. It doesn't matter what form of governance, if any, the tribe has, be it democratic, priestly, or a monarchy, the fact
As long as it happens to have a form of governance.
is that the tribe itself is a tribal state. It is a society, and when society controls a piece of territory, it becomes political. It forms a hierarchy of some kind, and that hierarchy becomes the state. The same applies elsewhere. A nation is a society, a commune is a society, a workers' trade union is a society, and all of these are hierarchies. So I did say that
I don't necessarily agree with that. I disagree with that. But I think that nation and social group, those aren't states. Like group, that's not state. Like some of these terms don't belong in here. And the term public sector is folded into what the state means, but it's not a synonym for state.
And all of these is the state, and that the state and society is a political hierarchy. But what I didn't say was that
Okay. I was gonna read your comment, but okay, it's gone.
the mere existence of a state meant that it was socialism. People took what I said to mean that, but I made it clear, or at least I thought I did, that the definition of socialism was the public ownership or control of the means of production. We'll come back to this specific definition later, but sticking to the wider point for now,
Yeah, but because you think the public means state, that means you think whenever the public or the state does anything, that's socialism, because it's using the means at its disposal to do something. It's the public sector acting with its finances. So effectively, they're right. Yeah, you do think socialism is whenever the state does anything.
public is the state, but that doesn't mean that everything is socialism. It's only socialism when the state or public
Does it? Yeah, exactly.
has control of the means of production.
Oh, the means of production specifically. Okay. I see you. I see you. You're throwing a little wrench into my criticism. All right, let's see if you can recover this, because the means of production, that means something very specific, right? You know, that's about how wealth is produced. So let's see if he's gonna stick to this.
So, if we have a state and then a free market, we can't say that the entire nation is socialist. The state might be socialist, their policies might be socialist, and they might be scheming to convert the economy into socialism, at which point we could say that the state is socialist. But if the market is free, if the private sector can operate without public sector interference, then the
But as soon as the public sector interferes, it becomes socialism, and therefore it's not capitalism, and it's not a free market, and therefore you can just chuck the term capitalism out the window, right? That's your opinion? So yeah, effectively, whenever the state does anything, it's socialism. What's your point here? Like, you're on the one hand, you're like, oh no, I don't think socialism is whenever the state does anything, only when they own the means of production. But if they own, like, anything of the means of production, and if they use their influence as the state to interfere in any way with the market, then we don't have a free market, and therefore it's not capitalism. Okay.
the market itself is not socialist.
You want to have it both ways. You want to be wrong and wrong at the same time. Well, okay.
And thus the whole country cannot be said to be socialist even if the state is. Because this is a major bone of contention, I'm going to hammer this point home by explaining this in a different way. Let's take our example of the tribe again. For a lack of better terms, let's just say that the tribal nation as a whole is called the Purple Tribe. So when I say the word purple here, I mean the entire tribal society or nation, government or not. So we have purple, then we have the individual private huts, and the public tribal state government. Now, let's just say in this instance they have a king who happens to be a socialist. He's running the government.
So this here, the tribal state government, would be the state. The private huts would not be the state. The purple tribe as a whole would be society. So that throws a whole wrench into this previous diagram. Like this diagram directly contradicts this diagram where he puts society as a synonym for state, social group as a synonym for state. All of these groups are all these terms mean the same thing to him, except for when he doesn't want them to, except for when he wants to make a Venn diagram where they're clearly distinct things, where the purple circle includes the state and something else, which he would, I guess, call the private sector. He colors it in blue the same way he did on this diagram. Sorry, I'm just going to go back. There we go.
Yet, we would say that the king is socialist, the government is socialist, but the private sector isn't socialist.
What? What does this have to do with owning the means of production? Let's say the means of production is all controlled by these private huts, and the king demands some tribute from these private huts every now and then. How is the king socialist? He doesn't own the means of production. He merely demands tribute from the means of production. So how is this a socialist institution?
Thus, purple cannot be described as a socialist nation, even if the government is socialist. There's two ways we're using the word society or public, and they're intermingled. Society as a whole is called the public, and the public sector is the state. But while the public might not be socialist, the public sector could be socialist. Now,
in what way would the public sector not be socialist by these reductive models you're using? In what way could it possibly not be socialist? You keep saying that everything, like any way that the the state exists or interferes with the market at all as socialism. And then you're like, the public sector could be socialist. In what way could it not be by the models you're using?
You might argue that this is confusing and therefore that proves that I'm wrong, but I'm just telling you what the definitions
No, it's just incoherent. You contradict yourself constantly.
of the words are and how they were used historically and how they're used today. It's not my fault the ancient Greeks, the Romans, and we today have conflated the words public and society with the state. I'm just telling you that's what's happened. Don't shoot the messenger. If I say the word British, am I referring to the British Isles? Am I referring to the United Kingdom of Great Britain? Am I referring to the government of the United Kingdom? Or am I referring to the British public? There's no way to know because we've mashed all those terms together. The only way to know is for me to make it clear. The British government, or the British Isles, or the British people who call themselves British,
Okay.
etc. But just saying British by itself could mean several different things. Well, the same thing applies to the word public. Do I mean the nation as a whole, the people within it, the government, or something else?
Okay.
Exactly. It's all mashed together under the same word. This is how you guys have been tricked. When they say that socialism is when society owns the means of production, you're assuming that to mean that the people or the workers will run the factories together democratically.
That's what the whole point of it was, though. That's literally why they invented socialism. Like, why do you think they invented socialism? This term? Why do you think that people started adopting this ideology? That was the whole point of it. So, what is he getting at here?
But that's the trick. Your socialist leaders may even encourage you to think that, but in reality the word society has two meanings. One is the people as a whole, and the other meaning is the state. You think it means the first one, but it doesn't. It means the second.
But no, it means the first one. You can't just assert that it means the second one, because it doesn't. It means the first one. Now, it happens that these are not two completely distinct ideas, actually. They kind of mesh together when you have the idea of a democratic state, because then you can argue that actually the means of production are democratically socialized in the hands of the proletariat because they are nationalized, and the government is democratic, so therefore blah 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 blah. And so these two, what you're presenting as two distinct ideas, actually kind of blur. And so, yeah, like he acts like he's blowing our minds with this shit, but like he's saying nothing.
Instead of the people running the factories, it'll be the state running the factories, because the state is society. The people are the public, and the public...
He's acting like socialism was from the beginning this like conspiracy, this ruse to be like, we'll say, get this, we'll tell the people that they'll be in charge. We'll tell the people that they're gonna own the means of production. But really, we're just gonna give it to the state. Like, he acts like that is what the original creators of socialist theory were doing, which is just mind-numbingly stupid.
Is the state. That's why you've been tricked.
Yeah, you've been tricked. This guy has figured everything out. This guy has figured out the deception at play. He's taken the red pill and he's realized, like, it doesn't take a genius to look at the Soviet Union and say, yeah, that doesn't actually live up to the expectation we were promised by the socialists. It doesn't take a genius to see that, but he's acting like this is some fucking revelation that like no socialists were aware of this before he pointed it out. Like, I'm sure the people who are criticizing you already know this basic shit, my dude. You're just not understanding their criticism.
The same thing. The people are the state. Democracy is a state, a form of government. Socialism is state control of the means of production, nothing else. I hope that makes.
But it's other things too. It's like there you can have for instance a society in which labor unions, who are not folded into the state in some big corporatist kind of scheme. They're independent labor unions who own the means of production. Or you could have a system whereby just people come together and create businesses that are democratically owned by those members. You can have that. Those are models of socialism that are not run by the government, where property is not directly in the hands of the government. So you're just wrong.
Makes sense, because I'm honestly at a loss as to how to make this any clearer. Like,
I just love his smug idiocy. Like, I am at a loss for how to make this completely incoherent bullshit that I just made up off the top of my head fucking clear to you idiots. How are you so stupid that you're... It's not that we don't understand you. It's that what you're saying is fucking dumb, okay?
really don't know how people are not understanding this and then misinterpreting really basic things that I'm saying. If you see anyone in the comments struggling with this concept,
he's honestly almost kind of giving me Dark Side Phil vibes.
Perhaps you might have a better go at it than explaining it than me, because I've exhausted all my options at this point, and it's a really basic concept.
He knows better. He's got it all figured out. We've had the wool pulled over. We can't believe our eyes. Yeah, it's like, did you guys know that actually in the Soviet Union, the workers didn't own the means of production? You've all been tricked. They got you to believe something that wasn't true. And I figured it out. It's like, wow. The socialists have really been fucking done over, haven't they? This whole time, we were just never aware of the deception.
To summarise this point then, historically, humanity has defined society as the state. Now, I personally don't agree with that statement. I think that it's dangerous. It's a dangerous idea to pretend that the state somehow represents society.
But isn't this the guy who says he's not part of society anyway? So it seems like he does kind of view the term society as bad as well. But I don't even know if that's true, that historically the word society has been conflated with state. I've never heard of that.
Because it doesn't in any way, shape or form. Even in a direct democracy,
are you guys defending a specific socialist POV, rejecting, just discussing? What I'm doing is rejecting this guy's very specific, like, cum-brained libertarian POV. That's what I'm doing. So, I happen to be a socialist, but in just a very vague, broad sense. Like, I don't have any specific socialist ideology that I believe in. And so I'm not like defending any specific socialist POV. I'm just criticizing this guy for being an idiot.
The state is not society and society is not the state. But that's my own personal view. And when presenting history, I've got to go with how the majority of humanity has defined things. And if the majority of humanity mistakenly believes that the state is society and that's how they've defined it, then that's what I have to say it is. If you think I'm wrong here...
I don't even know if that's true. Like, when he hasn't even provided any evidence that's true. Like, that's actually kind of a big claim that he's making, that historically the terms state and society have been conflated with each other to the point where they basically mean the same thing. I've never heard of that before. Like, that's a thing where if I said that in a video, I would provide evidence, because, like, it's a big claim that not a lot of people would have the context to understand. So I don't have any way to trust that what he's saying is true, because so far, like, everything he said has been total fucking bullshit. So why would he suddenly be right here when I've never heard of this before?
Then it's not me who's wrong, it's society, because society is the one thinking this, not me. The public sector is the state, that's what society says. Socialism is state ownership of or control of the means of production, that's what society says. I didn't make it up, nor do I necessarily agree, but that's...
No, you just don't understand. You didn't make it up, you just don't understand what's being said. Good for you.
What I've got to say, because history is a praxeology, a study of human action. If you...
Okay, this is where he says history is a praxeology. Yeah, that's not true, because from what Fredo was saying, praxeology is like studying like laws of human behavior. That's not what history is about. History is just about studying what happened and why it happened.
Humans have acted and defined something as X, then I can't say it's Z. I have to say society thinks it's X, even if I know it's Z. I can acknowledge it's Z, and I can argue that it's, we should rethink things, but ultimately it'd be wrong to not point out that the majority of people think it's X.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And the best part is...
The first time I've agreed with anything he said in this video.
That the people saying that I was wrong, saying that the public...
But, like, that's not why he was wrong. He wasn't wrong because he did that. He was wrong because he's just, like everything about his analysis is stupid. That wasn't the problem with your analysis, my friend.
Isn't the state also said that you've got to contribute to society. In other words, they say I've got to pay my taxes, because obviously if we don't hand over all our money to the Play-Dohs, who's going to build the roads? But what do these people mean by you've got to contribute to society?
Well, I can tell you what they mean in a charitable sense. I'm sure you'll give the uncharitable version, but what they mean in a charitable sense is that it's important for people to help each other out. It's important for there to be a system by which everybody contributes something for the benefit of everyone else. And if we don't systematize it in that way, it won't happen. And so that's the justification for taxation, and then using the funds generated by taxation to do public works and such.
Okay, so here's my money, and I've got to contribute to society, guys, so who am I forced to give my money to? Do I give it to the beggar in the street? Do I pay my editor, who is a member of society, and also...
No, you give it to the system, because the system is really important for maintaining the cohesion and the tranquility and the proper functioning of society. So you do have to give it to the state in order for the state to benefit society. So there is a distinction here between society and state, but I bet what Tick is going to say is that people are conflating society with state. When I don't think that's what they're doing. I think they're saying that the state is the necessary organ for making society function properly, which is not the same thing as conflating state with society. I think this is a dishonest representation of what people are saying when they tell them to contribute to society.
So paying them contributes to society? No, that's not what they mean. When they say you've got to contribute to society, they mean that I've got to pay my taxes. And who do I pay my taxes to? The state. So society is the state.
Checkmate, atheists.
You've got to contribute to society, you've got to contribute to the state. That phrase that the critics use confirms what I'm saying to be true.
No, it doesn't. It's just clearly you reading something into it that doesn't actually exist. You're just making stuff up.
When I explain...
And then creating this, like, funny little syllogism in order to get there. Like, this, therefore, that. But there's no logic in the therefore. It's just made up.
That socialism has been defined historically as the public, in other words state, ownership or control of the means of production I didn't make this up. Many socialists agree that this is the definition. I showed this in the video. I've shown it in subsequent videos, like my Hitler Socialism.
Yeah, there's a reason why people don't disagree that that's the definition of socialism, but they still think you're an idiot. Like, have you not put the pieces together that, they seem to agree with this thing I'm saying, but my conclusion they don't agree with. So it must be that they really disagree with this thing. No, it's they disagree with how you use this thing to get to the conclusion. It's this part in the middle, the logic part, that they're disagreeing with. It's not the thing that you started out with, that term. That's fine. They're not saying that you made this up. They agree with this. It's this part. It's your original contribution that's the problem. Okay?
Video. And I use multiple sources to back up what I'm saying. I'm listing a bunch of these sources at the bottom.
You use a lot of sources that are not actual proper academic sources. Congratulations.
Of the screen. And I'd list even more, but there's not.
Or you'll use primary sources like, for instance, Marx' Communist Manifesto and Marx Engels' Das Kapital, and then just straight up not understand what they say. So, congratulations again.
Enough room. Yet, despite this, apparently, all I used was the dictionary. No, I used multiple sources, including the dictionary. You'll notice that Karl Marx and Engels are in.
Yeah, I fail to understand multiple sources, not just the dictionary. I don't just fail to understand the dictionary. I also completely fail to understand every other fucking primary and secondary source I use. Congratulations.
There too, as is Rosa Luxemburg. I'm not just using the dictionary, I'm using primary and secondary sources too. Another criticism levelled at me in the Hitler Socialism
Sargon
video was that I quoted from Sargon of Akkad in my video. No, I did not. I quoted from 3 socialists who gave their own definition of socialism live during a Sargon of Akkad video. That's not the same thing as quoting from Sargon. Well, all 3 of...
It's fair enough to grab the sort of general tenor of socialism by looking at what actual socialists are saying about it. That's fair enough.
These socialists gave varying definitions of socialism, proving that they didn't know exactly what socialism is, but as I explained, they all actually meant the same thing. When the word...
Well, if they all actually mean the same thing, then that doesn't that suggest that they do know what socialism is, if all of their definitions cohere with each other? That doesn't make any sense.
Workers get together, they form a society. Society is the state. So, for example, when Xerxes said that socialism was worker ownership of the
But society isn't the state. That's not what they're saying.
means of production, whether he realizes it or not...
But because he didn't say that society equals the state and you're just making that up, then you have this like conclusion that's very convenient for you, but it's not what he said. You're just lying.
That means state control. And he
Yeah,
even
and that's a lie.
admits this when he says that it's when the workers control the
You're just straight up misrepresenting what this person believes.
state apparatus with a Dell computer. Because apparently, according to socialists, we can now run the entire economy off one Dell computer. Finnish Bolshevik and Bad Mouse were the other 2 of the 3 socialists, and are the reason I use this reference in the first place, because my public...
This is my favorite Tick History video so far. This one has just been trash from the start. Like, the other ones we reviewed, there were a lot of bad points. They were pretty bad. But, like, there was also some information, some good stuff. This is just a train wreck. This has just started horrible, and it just continues to be nothing but horrible. And that's why it's my favorite.
Public versus private video and my Hitler's Socialism videos were both...
Hold on, Sargon's video is still not likely to contextualize socialism properly. At least I think that's a fair guess. Well, I think the point is that Sargon was giving the socialists an opportunity to contextualize it properly according to their own viewpoint. And so I think it's fair enough to look at what socialists are saying about socialism and say, okay, this is generally what socialists seem to believe. I'm going to respond to that. That's fair enough. maybe it's not academic, but it's still a social critique of politics, even if it's not like academic theory or anything.
Responses in part to their videos or comments criticising me. I was responding to the Finnish Bolshevik and Bad Mouse as well as many others, so I needed to find out exactly what they thought socialism was. Well, the Finnish Bolshevik defined socialism as the collective ownership of the means of production, which he says is the classic Marxist definition. I agree with the Finnish Bolshevik, who, despite his many other flaws, is actually an honest socialist, unlike many others. Finnish Bolshevik then lists the Soviet Union, China, several Eastern European countries, and Cuba as all being socialist countries. Well, they're all states. Weird that, isn't it? He also, by the way...
They're all states? Well, according to you, everything is a state. Like, what kind of society can exist that isn't a state? Like, according to your... I'm going back to it. According to your weird-ass diagram, the term society is included in this list of terms that are conflated with states. So, like, what's your point? Yeah, of course they're going to be states because they're all societies.
To pretend that socialism isn't state control, even though it is. So, if I'm wrong, is the Finnish Bolshevik also wrong? Are all the socialists who know socialism to mean the state ownership...
No, you just don't understand anything. Including Finnish Bolshevik, probably.
...the means of production also wrong? But note, I did not quote from Sargon himself. Not that that would really matter if I did, but I actually didn't. So the criticism is completely...
Yeah, it kind of would matter if you did, but okay.
...wrong. Nevertheless, the criticism was there. LMAO. This naughty nerd cited Sargon of Akkad and Timcast as sources.
I still want to see the Timcast citations.
Others asked why this was an issue, and user Paid Government Shill said they're both cretins who don't have a clue what they're talking about. Marx and Engels are both cretins, but we're allowed to quote from them. Hegel is an emotional contradiction, but that's fine apparently. However, we'll just ignore those facts. Well, it's good news for Tick, since he was in fact citing Bad Mouse, Xerxes and the Finnish Bolshevik, not Sargon. So if we're going to dismiss sources on the basis that they were made by...
I mean, yeah, this is just a pointless discussion. Like, oh, he's cite... Like, this person was an idiot for saying this. So I agree... the moron was a moron for complaining about a moronic thing. Let's move on to Tim.
I don't agree 100% with Sargon or Tim Pool, but even so, I don't think it's right to dismiss their arguments. And in the case of Tim Pool, I wasn't quoting from him either. I was quoting from a news source that he displayed in his video.
He's displaying the Daily fucking Wire. I mean, is that any better than just quoting Tim Pool? Like, think, man, think. Like, is the Daily Wire... what is this article? SpongeBob SquarePants is a violent, racist colonizer, college professor says. I mean, okay. I guess it depends on what Tick History pulled from this video. I don't know what Tick History was quoting from this video. Or why people are criticizing him for it. I don't know, like the I guess like saying that Tick History used Tim Pool as a source. Yeah, that sounds bad. But like the more I'm looking at it, the more it's kind of seeming like maybe it's kind of an overblown criticism. But I will say that I don't think using the Daily Wire is any, like, better than just using Tim Pool.
Why? Because it was through Tim that I heard about this issue, so I wanted to give him some credit for covering the topic. Tim, like me, is someone who abandoned the left. These lefty critics of mine and Tim's might want to ask
I
themselves,
mean, Tim was hardly even on the left to begin with. And then he abandoned the left, but he's too much of a pussy to call himself a conservative. So he's still calling himself a liberal, a moderate liberal.
why we abandoned the left. What was the reason we did?
What are we saying here? If me, Dirt, and Tick were in a group, in a state of nature, and we voted democratically on everything we decided to do, we are state and society. How much can we scale until they are not? I don't exactly know the point being gotten at here, but perhaps you'll explain.
We decided that socialism wasn't what it made itself out to be. Maybe if you started listening to us, you would understand. But going back to the larger point, there's
Luxemburg.
plenty of socialists saying that socialism is state control of the economy. Rosa Luxemburg said, socialism means the striving of the proletariat to bring about the dictatorship of its class in order to get rid of the present form of production.
Yeah, I do think that generally state socialism was the model that people used back in the day. That was what they understood socialism to be. But there's diversity in the analysis. But yeah, typically people, I mean, especially people, Marxists like Rosa Luxemburg would feel that way. A central idea within Marxism is this idea of the dictatorship of the proletariat, where the proletariat knocks the bourgeoisie off of their kind of monopoly of capital and power, and they create some sort of a government, whether it's democratic or not. And this was kind of the sticking point, that would be a socialist government, and the sticking point is that, like, if it's democratic, then wouldn't that mean people could, like, vote for not having socialism, which kind of throws a big kind of question mark into the whole idea of socialism in general, which I think is perhaps one of the reasons why a lot of people became anarchists instead of Marxists, because that was the big issue with the First International, is that there actually was a lot of disagreement with Karl Marx, and those people sided with Mikhail Bakunin instead, who didn't believe in this. I mean, he's just straight up didn't believe in this dictatorship of its class thing. He was like, that's wrong. We don't want that. That's the bad way to bring about socialism. That's not going to bring about socialism in the way you want it to. So it's not like Rosa Luxemburg's idea of socialism is kind of like representative of all strains of thought at the time. It was just one very popular strain of thought at the time.
She wants to form a dictatorship over the economy, the state ownership of the means of production, and calls that socialism. But no, Rosa girl, you're wrong. The lefties who worship you, who have been misled by their statist teachers into believing that socialism is when there's puppy dogs and rainbows, says you're wrong. So you are, girl. There.
Yeah, it's just totally simplifying the complexity of socialism right here. Like, just not knowing the history of the debates about this subject, the various internationals that occurred, the 1898 crisis of Marxism, just like ignoring everything about the history. Yeah, what a great history channel, just ignoring all history in order to create propaganda. Beautiful.
Then you've got the Labour Party manifesto of 2017. For the many, not the few, apparently, because this is now Star Trek. The Labour Party is the
needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one. Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty pretty socialistic idea, I guess. Here's this cartoon. Ever hear the phrase, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few? Yes, it sounds very good until you're designated as one of the few. I guess so. But I mean, like, that's a very uncharitable way of interpreting it. Again, like you can take this and then like look at the literal meaning of the words and like come up with a situation in which like that doesn't make sense. This is the same way that people criticize utilitarianism. They'll like come up with some fucking scenario in which case like, oh, if it benefits the most people the greatest amount, and it's still fucked up. That totally discredits utilitarianism as a concept, and it's like, okay, but like you're having to like go out of your way to be a pedantic dick in order to criticize what's really just a general principle of philosophy, like a general method of informing how we view the decisions we make. You know, it's not meant to be like down to the gnat's ass every single time. This is exactly the sort of pedantic behavior that you see from all these smart asses in philosophy who I just find so irritating. And that's a big part of why I don't like a lot of Western philosophy, and I don't really respect philosophy all that much in general, just because a lot of it is just pedantic like this. Statist is a bit like the N-word to libertarians discussing anyone else. Yeah, I guess. Or it's their version of fascist, because the lefties will use that word, fascist, to describe everyone they hate. Libertarians, it's statist.
International Socialist Party of the UK. Many basic goods and services have been taken out of democratic control through privatisation. What does this mean? Democracy is when you vote for the state, giving the state power. So, the Labour Party are saying that goods and services were taken out of state power via privatisation. So they want to bring private rail companies back into public ownership.
They believe in nationalizing industry. That's a part of their socialist agenda. This says nothing about the nature of socialism being entirely wrapped up within the state structure. So he's like using this one example of a socialist manifesto and being like, see, all socialism is like this. No, that's not how it works. And even like if you were to talk to these Labour Party members, a lot of them would really agree with and support other versions of socialization, like the worker cooperative model. Like, Bernie Sanders put in, he offered up legislation to create like democracy in the workplace, giving workers, giving like the average employee a say in what goes on in the business, not necessarily owning the business, but giving them a say. That is very much a socialistic idea that is not run by the state. It's not like a state. It's state mandated, but it's not like democratically controlled by the fucking structure, the superstructure of the state, the institution of the state. That's not the institution that's getting power. It's the people who work for the company who are getting power in that situation via that mandate, which of course is a state mandate. So Tick would just take that and run with it, wouldn't he? He'd be like, it's all the same. It's not all the same. Shut the fuck up.
Well, they used to be nationalised into the state, so they want to bring them back into public state ownership. So there you go, we have a direct quote from the Labour Party, the supposed Workers' Party of the UK, more like the Shirkers' Party of the UK, using the word public to mean state. Reverse the privatisation of Royal Mail at the earliest opportunity. Again, Royal Mail used to be in state control, and they want to reverse the privatisation and make it state-owned again so they can read our mail. That sounds like public state ownership or control of the means of production to me. You've got Rosa Luxemburg.
So that they can read your mail? Is that what you're concerned about? Is that really a legitimate concern, that you think they're going to read your mail when it's state owned? I don't know enough about the whole Royal Mail controversy to, like, were they doing that when it was a state owned company or service? I don't know.
Karl Marx, numerous other socialists, the Labour Party, loads of dictionaries, a colossal amount of history books, all saying that socialism is the public state control or ownership of the means of production. There's a convergence of evidence all pointing to the same definition. But when I say this, apparently I'm wrong. No, you're wrong if you think socialism is anything other than state ownership or control of the means of production.
Yeah, when you conveniently ignore everything to the contrary and you only focus on the stuff that supports your own conclusion, then it's very clear that your conclusion is correct. This is Tick's whole modus operandi. Like, this is how he does everything. Just ignore everything to the contrary of what he wants to believe, and then spam you with a bunch of shit that confirms what he believes, and then he's like, see, I'm just the messenger, guys. It's like, no, you're the curator of a clearly biased worldview.
It's not when two workers hold a hammer or when two girls share one cup. It's when there's a totalitarian state in control of the economy. It's not when...
Now it's a totalitarian state, specifically. He just sneaked that in there, didn't he? He sneaked... He thought we wouldn't notice that he's just introducing this whole new element out of nowhere with no explanation. Okay.
Money has gone away... No, it's not. It's when the state is in control of the economy, regardless of what that economy looks like. If you think it's anything other than this, you have been tricked. You have been lied to. When I was a socialist, I knew what socialism was. The difference was that I was also been tricked into believing that if the state did stuff, it was good, and that when the free market did stuff, that was bad. Who taught me this? State minions in the miseducation system. Now I see reality. The free market...
Now I see reality, man. Yeah. The fucking transnational corporation that doesn't exist in any one country and always seeks the best deals at the biggest cost to the worker and exploits third world slave labor in order to make its goods as cheap as possible. That's where it's at, man. That's the pinnacle of what we can do.
Is good, and socialist totalitarianism is bad, unsurprisingly. Now, going back to Horatio, he said, "Forgive me if you've changed your mind on this, but I've heard you define a private business as owned by an individual or a family, and that's it. How does this correlate with historical definitions? Which political theorists are there who..."
Dude, I am excited to see what back-ass bullshit justifications he comes up with to figure out a way to make this make sense. I am so here for this.
"Would define Apple or Tesla as a publicly owned business because it's publicly traded." Okay, here's a quick Google search for what is a share. Investopedia says shares are units of equity ownership in a corporation. Wikipedia says a share is an indivisible unit of capital expressing the ownership relationship between the company and the shareholder. Hargreaves says a share is...
Yeah, I think we know what a share is. Can you get to the fucking point?
Simply a part ownership of a company. When a company is listed on the stock exchange, the shares have a market value and can be bought and sold. Knee Business Info says...
God, nobody fucking cares. Like, everyone knows what a share is. Move on.
Shares represent, become one, if not thousands of results.
Okay, we get the point.
Something that's publicly traded is publicly owned.
Wow. Wow. I mean, I told you I was excited, didn't I? To hear his justification and what it would be. This is perfect. So, because, because, uh, something like the term publicly traded kind of sounds like publicly owned, and they kind of, on a very literal basis, divorced from any kind of like inherited like social meaning, like any kind of contextual meaning. When you strip it of all like historical meaning, these terms publicly traded and publicly owned kind of mean the same thing. Because of that, they are the same thing, and any actual like an analysis of the way the terms are really used by people who actually have been using these terms for hundreds of years doesn't matter. We can just throw all that out the window, because wow, that's fucking big brain thinking. That's some real great original contribution to political theory you've made here. Tick history, wonderful.
Let's take Amazon as an example. This article.
Let's skip this part because I already know what he's going to say.
Marx shaking hands with Wall Street bankers and corporates. They are one and the same. Karl Marx was doing the bidding of Wall Street. He was calling for the shared ownership of the means of production. More power to the corporations, also known as syndicates.
What the fuck? He's doing it again. I can't believe it. This guy doesn't understand how the English language works. This guy is a total fucking moron. Like, oh my god. Like, I'm astounded. He's doing it again. I thought this was like a weird little glitch in his brain in the last video where he was saying that like corporations and like the fascist meaning of corporations, like the syndicate, were the same thing. I thought that was like he had a weird brain like aneurysm that just disrupted his ability to make logical connections in that video. No, he actually thinks that. He actually thinks that they're the same thing. That like this version, that like the labor union version of corporation is the same as like the publicly traded company version of corporation. He thinks that they're the same thing. I bet he thinks, dude, this is the same thing that Son of Tiamat did in that video about fascism they talked about, where he quoted the liberal fascism book. He was like, but wait, you can make the argument that fascism was corporatist. Well, you know, the New Deal was also corporatist. You know, FDR worked with corporations all the time in the New Deal era. It's like, that's not the same version of corporatism. It's like a totally different meaning of the word. When people say that America is a corporatist country, they're using the term corporatist to mean crony capitalist, which is a totally fucking different concept from syndicalist corporatism. I can't believe there are two of these guys. There are two of these guys, these chuds, who do this, who conflate meanings of corporatism and corporation. Like, this is amazing. This is amazing. This is just baffling stupidity. Wow. I am impressed.
Syndicalism or corporatism is a left-wing ideology. I wonder why. Going back to Horatio, he said that I was wrong because nobody defines Apple or Tesla as a publicly owned business just because it's publicly traded. But they do.
No, they don't. That's why you're wrong. You're wrong because this connection you're making is not actually used by people in real life. It's just a weird, like, semantical kind of like trap that you've created in order to justify your position. It bears no reality on anything that actually exists. People don't actually talk this way. People don't actually use these terms in the way that you are using them. This is like a weird thing that only you do. Okay? This is you only. So what this guy Horatio is saying is that people don't use these words in this way, so it's erroneous to do that. Which is it's ironic because that was the point that he was making earlier. He was like, if people use these terms historically to mean a certain thing, then I have to acknowledge that they mean this thing, even if I think they should mean something else. Like that he made that point earlier in the video, and now he's directly contradicting that point by failing to do it here. Wow.
Owned and publicly traded are the exact same thing as every...
The whole foundation of his argument is Terrence Howard-esque. I don't know who Terrence Howard is, but he sounds like a big brain genius.
Source in the world says so. When you buy a share, you're buying shared ownership of the company. I don't know how you didn't know this, but you didn't.
I love it. He keeps doing this. He keeps being like, I don't know how to make it any clearer. How do people not know this stuff? Like, wow, the density. It just goes over his bald head completely.
And you're not the only one. This is a very common criticism of me, that I said that corporations are shared ownership of the means of production. Which it is, but apparently people didn't realise this. And then you and all these other critics have the nerve to say that I don't know what I'm talking about. Well, I think you'll find that I do know what I'm talking about. I think you'll find that my political and economic opinions are not opinions. They're facts, and aren't completely ludicrous as you claim they were. I think you'll find that I do understand more than the very basics of the political theory I discuss.
No, you understand less than the basics. You fail to understand the most basic aspects of political theory. My guy, like, you're not even on that level, okay? You're not even on that level. So don't even pretend that you can even pass that level, because you haven't made it there.
It is, in fact, yourself that is wrong, who doesn't understand the basics, who didn't even know what a share is, and you're not the only one. Lots of people criticising me also did.
Dude, this is deluded. The guy, Horatio, said absolutely nothing about the definition of share here. He said that Apple and Tesla are not publicly owned just because they're publicly traded. This has nothing to do with the definition of share. And then he's like, you don't even know what the definition of share is. It's like, nobody said anything about that.
You were. This is what frustrates me. People wonder why I get frustrated and annoyed or respond to the trolls. These aren't trolls. Horatio is not a troll. Horatio has got a misguided view of the world. But the frustrating thing is that the critics like Horatio are so adamant that they're right that they'll dismiss all the evidence. They'll dismiss everything I say, they'll unsubscribe, they'll spout lies about what I said, they'll claim I didn't know.
No, they're simply bringing up stuff that you've ignored. You're the one who's dismissing evidence. Like, we get your evidence. Like, it's not hard to understand the points that you're making. But there's like other stuff besides that contradicts what you're saying that you're just conveniently ignoring.
Know anything about what I was talking about, which is all not true. I do know what I'm talking about. Horatio is the one who's wrong here, as are a lot of other critics.
Just the malding cope with this fucking pathetic human being. I bet if he read Plato's Republic, he'd call him a statist socialist. Oh, no doubt he would. In fact, didn't he reference Plato earlier? He called the state like a bunch of Platos. Did I hear that? I feel like I heard that. Terrence is the guy from Iron Man on Joe Rogan last month who has astrophysicists the world over telling him why 1 × 1 = 2 is not the secret to the universe. Yeah, that's this guy, for sure. Same level of thinking.
Yet somehow I'm the one who gets this reputation that I don't know anything about politics and economics. But it's not me, it's them. They don't know what they're talking about, but somehow they've managed to project their ignorance onto me. They don't know, so they accuse me of not knowing, even though I do know. It's just frustrating.
Dude, this is like... Okay, I'm trying to come up with a good analogy for this. Tick history is basically a guy looking at a bunch of rectangles, some of which are squares. And he says, all rectangles are squares. And then people are like, what about these rectangles that aren't squares? And tick history is like, do I have to run it through for you? Okay, idiot. Look at this rectangle. Is this a square or not? Obviously, it's a square. Now look at this rectangle. Is it a square or not? Obviously, it's a square. And he keeps doing that a few times, and he's like, see? Every fucking rectangle I've shown to you is a square, so why don't you believe me? How are you not understanding this basic shit? And it's like, but you're ignoring all the rectangles that aren't squares. That's the problem. Like, that is the level of idiocy I'm dealing with here. It's that bad.
In mind, it's not just the critics who think corporations are private entities. I've read books and have heard Austrian economists refer to corporations as being capitalist.
Yeah, and you just the same Austrian economists who you're so quick to reference when talking about socialism, something that has nothing to do with Austrian economics, really. You're then skeptical of them when they talk about capitalism, which is in their wheelhouse. That's wow, what great selective reading you're doing.
Love for someone from the Austrian camp, like Tom Woods or whoever, to dive into the...
Hold on, we have Terence misunderstands the word multiple, yet everyone is overthinking the reason he's getting it wrong. This guy and the words public and state are the reason I compared. Or multiply, rather. Interesting.
Sources and verify whether what I've said in my videos are right or wrong. I want to know for absolute certainty that if socialism is social ownership, why are public corporations that are socially owned by their shareholders classed as being private?
Okay. This is an actual question, and I'll give you an actual answer for it. It's because the thing is that what we're dealing with is a separation between the laborer and the product of his labor. We're dealing with what is called in Marxism alienation. The laborer is alienated from the profit that he is creating, and the profit is instead going to other owners who own capital, even when they don't necessarily contribute to the management of it. They own it still. That's in the case of a publicly traded company. Now, you can also have owners who are involved, both in public and private companies, owners who are involved in the administration of that capital. And they would, of course, have a natural right to some of that profit. But it's just the opinion of the socialists that because they are hogging all of that profit, and only giving a wage or a salary that of their choosing, that's not like a proper dividend from the actual what is generated of the wealth. There's a separation there where the worker is not enfranchised at all in this system, and everything is up to the discretion of this sort of management class within the company, and the worker has no say on anything. And so, yeah, it's the people who own have this sort of private control over something that, in the opinion of the socialists, should be actually controlled by everyone who is involved in the generation of this wealth.
Is it not shared ownership? Then what's the point of a share of ownership? Maybe someone...
Is there any philosophy in that bookshelf? I don't know. It looks like it's mostly history stuff, World War II stuff. A lot of books on Stalingrad. Wow, this guy must know a lot about Stalingrad. Because he has a lot of books that are just called Stalingrad.
One can ask around for me and get a response from someone like Tom Woods because, well, that would be awesome. Horatio then says, you have widened the definition of community to include everything that isn't a family, because that's politically convenient for you to do. Why isn't a family...
My bookshelf. Yeah, there's some philosophy on here. I haven't read much of it. There's Leviathan, there's Marx, there's Kierkegaard, either or. There's, I think, that one dude, the French guy. I'm not narrowing it down at all. I can't remember his name. There's probably a few others. I sometimes will, if I see a philosophy book for cheap, like at a book sale, library book sale, I'll pick it up.
Family a community? How isn't a family-owned farm not actually a mini socialist state, just like Apple or Tesla? Okay, Horatio.
I don't think it's Sartre. It's Camus, that was it.
Let's just pretend that a family-owned farm or business is socialism now. So, are we all living in a socialist paradise? Because all the family-owned farms and businesses exist, so it must be socialism, right? Oh wait, no, because that's stupid. Are you seriously suggesting that a family-owned farm is a socialist state? I mean, it's simply ridiculous. And what you're essentially asking here is, why isn't a village a city?
Okay. I must have missed some crucial context here. So let me read that again. You've widened your definition of community to include everything that isn't a family because that's politically convenient for you to do so. Why isn't a family a community? How isn't a family-owned farm not actually a mini socialist state just like Apple or Tesla? Well, he's not saying that it is. He's saying that under your logic it should be, and that you've arbitrarily excluded family from this list, this long list of words that you have identified with state, which we can repeat them. Here, the public sector, the nation, the society, the social group, the collective, the commune, the group, the state. The point that he's making is that you have, for no fucking reason, removed the word family from that list. And he's like, why? Why did you do it? He's not saying that family-owned farms are socialist states. This is like such an idiotic misunderstanding of this guy's point.
That's stupid. Are you seriously suggesting that a family-owned farm is a socialist state? I mean, it's simply ridiculous.
No, he's not.
And what
he's
you're
not
essentially
saying
asking
that.
here is, why isn't a village a city?
It reminds me of iDubbbz's content cop on Leafy Is Here when he played this clip of Leafy saying, dude, is this person fucking retarded? And it was clearly someone with Down syndrome, and iDubbbz was like, yes. And then he played the clip again. Dude, is this person fucking retarded? Yes, she is retarded. What do you want? Do you want a fucking medal for figuring that out? Yes, she is retarded. That's what this reminds me of. It's like just the silliness of it. It's just so silly.
Well, the reason a village isn't a city is because villages are smaller than cities. There's less buildings, less people, less infrastructure. Villages aren't cities for the same reason that families are not socialist states. They're too small, and you can't have socialism on the family level. If you...
What an arbitrary distinction. It's small? That's the only distinction you make?
You could, then just go away and implement socialism and leave the...
I mean, you literally can have socialism on the family level. Like if you run your family farm like a socialist institution, you can do that. Like, there's no rule saying you can't. Like,
rest of us alone. Historically, a family was defined as something smaller than a community. In fact, I showed precisely this in the public versus private video. A family would merge with others to become larger families. In ancient times, these were known as gentes, which is where we get the word gentleman from. In other words, families would get bigger until they became noble families in the hierarchy. Above this, you would then have the fratria or curia, fraternities or brotherhoods.
Dude, nobody cares. This is totally irrelevant information. He's just trying to sound smart here. Like, he's trying to sound smart, and he's trying to justify this with, like, historically, family is something smaller than a community. And it's like, well, not historically, just in fucking common usage, the word group is very often something much smaller than a state. So why is the term group included on this list of states, but family isn't? It doesn't make any sense. It's almost like he didn't think this through. Wow, what a
is somehow
shock.
socialist. And that's fine, but that's not what it was historically. And I would also say it doesn't make sense to call it that. It's too small to be classed as a community by itself. Private property means an individual or small family property, not communism. So even logically, it doesn't make sense to say that a family is a communist utopia. It's not because
God, he's still okay.
it's politically convenient for me to
gonna
say
keep
this,
going.
it's because that's just the way it is in reality. I'll try to be brief, as I'm on a
I love how most of this video is just him responding to this totally reasonable criticism from Horatio Pelagius. And just embarrassing himself over and over and over.
mobile, and I don't want to get too much into the weeds on this, but the heart of social ownership is ownership by the community in which it operates. State ownership is not automatically social ownership, as the state may not necessarily be a legitimate representative.
I wouldn't agree with that. I think if there are socialists who would say that, but I think that's narrowing the tent for what counts as socialism too much. You can say it's against the spirit of socialism, but I wouldn't say it means it's not socialism if a state isn't democratic, because then you can argue, well, what technically is a democratic state? There are various different levels of democracy. What counts as democracy? Like, is a democratic republic where corporations, and I'm not talking about syndicates, I'm talking about publicly traded companies, okay, Tick? Don't confuse them. I know they're very easy for you to confuse with each other. But, is a democratic republic where publicly traded companies have a lot of influence on the government, is that democratic? There's a lot of ways you can split hairs here, and so I think it's kind of pointless to do it like this, where you're like, well, state ownership is not automatically social ownership because state may not necessarily be the legitimate who are you to say what's the legitimate representative of the community? It's just your opinion.
Of the community. If it isn't, then the community has no claim to ownership of state assets. Okay, so there's a couple of points here, and again, he's certainly not the only one to say this, just one of the more recent ones. So, the first portion of this assumes that state ownership is not automatically social ownership. Yes, it is, because the state is society, as explained before. I'm not going to labour over this point, we've already been over it before, but he says the state may not necessarily be a legitimate representative of the community. It isn't a legitimate representative of the community. It never will be. Democracy is a lie, it's snake oil. And this is where I disagree with Mises, who was pro-democratic, at least in his early years. No, the state isn't and cannot be a representative for me. It might claim to be, it might pretend to be, but it isn't. That's my entire point. The state is not me, even though it claims to be, and even though the language says it is. They say that the state is society, and because I'm a member...
Now we're just getting into his libertarian cum brain spiel. Let's suffer through it.
...of society, therefore I have to contribute to society. Except, I'm not a member of society. The state is not...
And this is the silly clip we made fun of earlier when we were watching Freda's video. I'm not a member of society. I, the guy who's living in a house or apartment that was built by other people, that's lit by electricity generated by other people, who drinks and bathes in water that's funneled to my house by other people, who eats food that was produced by other people, who went to a university and got a passing grade of C minus on mediocre work that was graded by other people so that I could get a job working with other people in order to make my money, am not part of society. Genius, just fucking genius libertarian intellect right here. He figured it out.
Society, even though it claims to be, and therefore I don't want to contribute to society, the state. However, historically, the state has claimed to be society, and the language represents this because people have mistakenly believed for millennia that the state is society, and you've got to contribute to it with tribute, peasants. I can't change that, unfortunately, but I can point it out, which is what I'm doing. You say if the state isn't a legitimate representative of the community, then the community has no claim of ownership of state assets. Correct. And the best part is,
He's a believer in Hoppianism. What is that?
this is exactly what socialism is. Socialism is a lie. It promises you something it won't deliver. You think that socialism will benefit
I mean, I kind of agree about that.
the workers or the common man. No, it's designed to trick you into voting in totalitarianism. It's not a legitimate representative of you or I, despite calling itself a democracy. It's lying to you. The ideology is designed to trick you into believing the lie.
No, it's not. It's not some big conspiracy of secret fascists, or I guess fascist isn't the proper word, but secret authoritarians. It's not like some big fucking conspiracy created. Like, it's not like Marx was sitting there like, how am I gonna trick these fucking idiots into voting for authoritarian government? I know, we'll just tell them that they're being liberated. Or I guess Marx was not a proponent of electoralism, but you get what I say. I'm saying, like, install an authoritarian. How do I get these simpletons to vote or revolt against their own interest? I know, I'll create this thing called socialism that'll really just be a ruse. It's like, no, that's not that's not what happened.
The red pill is waking up from the matrix and seeing the world for as it really is. That's what you need to do now. You need to realise that socialism, communism, whatever, are all lies designed to trick you into enslaving yourself.
God, the absolute demagoguery of a guy who claims to be like a history channel, just getting on this soapbox saying some fucking insane hogwash. Like, I hope this isn't how I sound when I make my videos. I hope I at least sound like I'm trying to give the other side the benefit of the doubt, you know?
Just wake up. You can like or dislike
Wake
social
up,
ownership.
sheeple.
That's not the point here. Correct.
Take the red pill. The everyone who has this kind of wake up, take the red pill rhetoric, it's just so funny because they think like the fact that they've come to a certain conclusion based on their life experiences and the things that they've learned, and the fact that this conclusion happens to disagree with the way a lot of other people think, they think that means they're like some fucking maverick who's like his eyes have been opened in a way that other people's just haven't. Like, he can magically see things that other people can't. It's like it's a level of like self-importance that is just so fucking stupid, and it's so like megalomaniacal. Like, you have to think that you're some fucking genius in order to use this kind of red pill rhetoric that I see all the time. And conspiracy theorists love doing this. It's so silly.
The point is that you can't just define it as something that it isn't. I've not done that.
Hold on, we got both socialism and libertarianism are at equal risk of falling rapidly into totalitarianism due to their trust in the nature of man. Libertarianism is more fragile. It's like guru selling New Age enlightenment. Yeah. That's an interesting point that you made, though. I would have to think about that more.
I've given you the historical definitions. I have engaged with you, Tick. I have watched hundreds of hours of your videos, and I've watched all the content you've made on your politics, including the longest one, repeatedly before unsubscribing. I respect you as a content creator and for how you engage with your community, like you are in this conversation.
Yeah, this is clearly a guy who did not realize the kind of brain he was dealing with. He was like, I just like videos about tanks and the Battle of Stalingrad. I'll watch this guy. And then he becomes increasingly horrified by what he's supported and subscribed to for years. Like, God, that's gotta be a hard pill to swallow. Just realizing that this person is a total idiot and you thought that he was offering something valuable, and just feeling emotionally crushed by that. And now he's at the mercy of this guy emotionally because he's like invested himself slightly into this dude's channel, enough to watch hundreds of hours of content. And so now it's like he's at the mercy of this guy, and he's like begging him, please don't be as stupid as I think you might be. Please let me see that there's something in you that can rationally observe information and synthesize proper conclusions. Please demonstrate something, because I don't want to believe that you're this stupid. And then Tick drops this fucking video on him to just dash all those hopes on the pavement. Like, oh, you thought that I was going to be smart? Nope, nope. I'm going to double down harder than you've ever seen. I'm going to fuck you in the ass with my giant fucking big brain dick. Whew. I feel bad for this guy. He really got played.
I've heard you out. I just disagree. The argument just doesn't hold water. Yeah, the argument I didn't make, but you think I did, doesn't hold water. You didn't hear me out. You let your emotions cloud your judgment, and you misheard what I said. You don't disagree with me, you disagree with the straw man argument you're pretending that I said. And for this reason, I don't believe that you watched my videos repeatedly before unsubscribing. If you did,
and now he's offering extra disrespect, like you were never even a fan from the beginning. Like, wow.
Ears were open.
How classy. This guy's really classy, isn't he?
But your mind was closed. More likely, you weren't listening.
Oh my god, the blue pill. You were taking the blue pill. Your eyes were closed the whole time. You weren't seeing what was right in front of you.
Or were seeing what people were writing in the comments or on Reddit or on other YouTube channels and jumped to conclusions about what I was trying to say rather than what I actually said. Hundreds or thousands of other people managed to watch what I said and didn't come to the conclusions you've made, yet somehow you did.
Those people watched this video and like lazily kind of took in some of the information and were like, oh, that sounds about right, I'll give it a like. These were not people who actually analyzed the video. Like, when you actually think about what you're watching, then it's like, oh, this doesn't make any sense.
Did. I don't know how you did this, and you're not the only one, but you're wrong. Now, another point that I said in these videos, but need to clarify because a lot of people seem to miss this, is that corporations are states. They're not the central state, although they might be.
I don't agree. It's obviously not any definition that people have used historically. Maybe it's his personal definition. I don't agree with it on either an historical level or just a basic level.
But they are states by themselves. The definitions of all the words we've used so far makes this clear. They are means of production that are publicly owned. Therefore,
wait, what does that have to do with state, though?
Are democratic and socialist.
Okay, yeah, I mean, they're... All right, I'm not even gonna bother. He's just like he's just descending into just a mush-mouthed mess of jumbled thoughts that are just scattered around his brain at this point. Like this is lacking whatever coherency it even had from the beginning.
They're not private. By society's own rules, once they're on the stock exchange, they're no longer private.
I am so glad I decided to watch this. Like, this is going to be the best clip to put on my channel, because this is just total fucking ass from start to finish. It's the best. I love it. I love it too much.
They've evolved or leveled up from private to public, and have thus become mini-states in themselves. If a tribe can be a tribal
Total unadulterated failure of the human intellect.
state, then how can a corporation with thousands of employees not be classed as a state? It makes no sense.
This is like a hidden gem. It has 100k views, but I feel like I haven't seen people talk about this guy. This guy is a gem, dude. These videos are so entertaining.
Not to class them as a state because there's nothing private about them. Yes, they might have a CEO, an individual who runs the show, but the show itself, the body of the people, the body of the nation, the corporation, is public. He is the public representative of the public corporation. He's not private, and he's not privately owning the corporation. Public corporations aren't private, and therefore aren't part of the private sector and can't be classed as capitalist. Yet, these facts don't stop people like this guy expressing the view that
Yeah, and we've already explained why that doesn't
this
make sense.
isn't the case.
So there's
Definitions
not
from
much left to say
Oxford
here.
Languages. Private enterprise equals business or industry managed by independent companies or private individuals rather than being controlled by the state. Yes, a private enterprise isn't controlled by the state. But we're not talking about private enterprise.
There's a difference between the term private property as used in Marxism and the term private business as used within the capitalist framework. But understanding the context of how terms are used is not what this guy's strong suit is. This guy's like, remove every term from anything resembling context.
We're talking about corporations and big businesses. That's where you've gone wrong. Private sector equals is the part of the national economy that is not under direct state control. Correct. But we're not talking about the private sector. We're talking about the public sector. Free market equals an economic system in which prices are determined by unrestricted competition between privately owned businesses. Correct.
And
but we're not talking about a free market or privately owned businesses. We're talking about publicly owned businesses
which are
and
part
the
of private property.
non-free market. Capitalism, an economic and political system in which a country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit rather than by the state. Correct. But we're not talking about private ownership of trade and industry, we're talking about public ownership of trade and industry. Big businesses and corporations that are independent and not controlled by the state are, by definition, private enterprises and part of the private sector. No, corporations are publicly owned. They aren't independent of the state, the government creates them. And they are states in and of themselves. They are public. They are not private enterprises, and therefore are not part of the private sector. Okay. They are monopolies created by the state. Corpse, body, organ, organs of the state. Bodies of the state, bodies of the people, corpse, video. So if you guys want me to make a response to him, I can do, but
I want you to keep making response videos for as long as you live, because these have been excellent.
Maybe it's not worth it because he probably won't listen to me anyway, since as a dialectical materialist, he doesn't believe that anything exists.
Oh, this is a new point. Okay. A new point of stupidity, because I was starting to get tired of him rehashing the same stuff over and over, but this is This is new one. I haven't heard the dialectical materialists don't believe anything exists thing before. That's a new one. I would love to have any kind of explanation for how that makes any kind of even backwards sense in this guy's worldview, because that's like, even when you look at the word, like the word materialist, the word materialist has material in it, which implies that things exist in a hard, fast sense. So, wow, the being a dialectical materialist means you don't think anything exists. That is something. Okay. Does he try to sell us a class to get rich on YouTube at the end? Honestly, this dude should do that, because he already has so many suckers who think that he's smart, who watch these videos and give likes to them. So he could probably dupe these people into buying his stupid class.
There is one counter argument that I do need to address, though, because I realised before I published the public versus private video that this might be an issue, and it was. I didn't put it in the video because I didn't think many people would notice, but it turns out they did notice, and a lot of people asked me about it. So, I said in the public versus private video that when a private family gets larger, it becomes part of the public sector. People then asked, okay, when does this transition happen? At what number of people does it happen? Like, if a group of 50 people is classed as private, is a group of 51?
Wow, they found the very obvious flaw in his very restrictive semantical reasoning. This is what happens. This is the problem with using semantics to justify your opinions, is that you can always split hairs, because that's all semantics is like splitting hairs based on definitions. And so, well, why can't I split hairs on your definitions? You can just infinitely regress into absurdity, and that's what people are doing here. They're poking him like, here's your logic used against you. So let's see how he handles this.
People public. When's the cutoff point? Is there a cutoff point? And some people asked this because they were being genuinely curious and wanted clarification. Fair enough. But a lot of people claim that because I didn't or couldn't define this with hard numbers, it proved my definitions were wrong. So, okay, I need to clarify this. At what number of people does a village become a town? At what number of people does a town become a city? You'll find that there isn't a set definition. There are villages here in the UK with only a couple of thousand people in them that are classed as cities, and cities that are classed as towns because they've not been formally declared as cities. Some have cathedrals, some don't. There are cities with fewer people in them than some towns.
So is his point that he doesn't have to define? He doesn't have to split hairs here? It's just something that you're supposed to feel out with the vibe? Well, that would be fine if he wasn't making all of his arguments about splitting hairs based on precise verbiage. Like, a family doesn't count as a state because it's too small. Well then, okay, if you're making that very precise, arbitrary distinction, then why can't we question at what point does a family get too big to be considered part of the private sector? If you don't have an answer to that, then why do you still hold to this idea that the public sector is everything except families? Like, that's the one thing that's not part of the public sector.
And towns with fewer people in them than some cities. And the reason why is because the distinction between a village...
Yeah, my brain is going to be in recovery mode after taking in all these high-level important ideas. Carl, too, says, believers in dialectical materialist analysis of history and society don't believe in existence. My brain just exploded. Yeah, I know. It's like the exact opposite of what they believe. This guy just straight up said they believe the exact opposite of what they believe. Amazing. Amazing. See, I said before it was a scale size thing he was going for. It goes nowhere. But yeah, it's it's a scale size thing he's going for, but when you try to get him to determine what scale and size are you talking about, then he has no answer. Then suddenly his whole philosophy on language changes. He's like, well, really, I mean, the terms town and city mean different things, but there's no precise, dividing line. Well, then why is everything except for family part of the public sector?
And a town and a city is not set in stone. That's not my fault. That's not my...
He loves shifting the blame. He loves making everything not his fault. Nothing is ever his fault. He's always innocent. He never did anything wrong, did he?
Definitions of these things being wrong, that's just reality. And we can argue about this, and we can...
It's very dark side Phil, this kind of behavior. It's never my fault. I'm never the one who is causing my own problems. If people aren't watching my stream, it's because they are the problem.
Debate it, and maybe we can formalize the definitions in the future, but for now, there is no definition. If we take Google, it says
I love it how a guy who's obsessed with finding precise definitions of things is like, there's no definition, so it's not my fault. There's no definition. It's like, isn't your whole thing like down to the gnat's ass defining everything and then using that as a way to conflate terms that don't actually mean the same thing?
A village is a group of houses and associated buildings larger than a...
Yeah, he's against postmodernism unless it benefits him to be a postmodernist.
Hamlet, and
that's how they always are, these people, though. Jordan Peterson is the same way.
Smaller than a town, situated in a rural area. But Wikipedia contradicts this, saying a village is a clustered human settlement or community, larger than a hamlet but smaller than a town, with a population typically ranging from a few hundred to a few thousand. Though villages are often located in rural areas, the term urban village is also applied to certain urban neighbourhoods. So it's not rural. A village can be urban. And what do you mean by a few hundred or a few thousand? Is 2,000 a few? Is 3,000 a few? Is 5,000 a few? Where's the cutoff? If 4,000 is the cutoff and a village has exactly 3,900...
This is like a totally pointless argument now. Okay, now he's on the credits.
Same principle applies to the idea of a small private family and a large public family. I don't know exactly where the cutoff point is because it hasn't been defined. That's not my fault, that's just the reality of the situation. I actually think it's because they're deliberately flexible enough terms so that they can apply depending on the situation. So,
the guy who doesn't believe in flexibility of terms at any other point in this video suddenly at the end is like, these are flexible terms and they can mean different things applied to different situations. Well, then why don't you apply that same method to every other word that you've used and created these rigid definitions for, and then used that rigidity to accomplish these propagandistic aims of yours? It's so transparent.
A family of 4 might own a farm and might be classed as private. Apparently I said Rome was socialist at some point.
I bet he did.
I don't remember when I said that.
Well, the fact that other people are saying you did means that you definitely did, because it is something that's exactly stupid enough for you to say it.
And despite asking for a timestamp, I'm still waiting.
Well, hopefully someone gets it to you, because even if they do get it to you, you'll make a response video where you just try to justify everything that you said, like, yeah, I said that Rome was socialist, and, well, I think I was actually correct. When people told it to me, I didn't believe them because it sounded too stupid for me to actually have said it. But now that I see myself saying it, I think I was correct in saying it. It's never his fault. He's never wrong.
I've addressed the Tick thinks North Korea is a democracy argument in 2 videos now, including this one. There's also an entire debate on the political spectrum that I haven't addressed. That's...
Okay. Well, that was a lot of fun. Ironically, he's being very postmodern himself, but I'm sure he blames them. They are deconstruction edging. They get right there before a point can be made and stop. Yeah, I mean, it's getting late, and the reason I'm talking quieter now is because I live in a house with other people. So I would love to keep streaming, but unfortunately, I can't. But it was a lot of fun going through this video. I'm definitely going to put this up on my channel. This was gold. I loved this one. This is just non-stop total failure of the human intellect. So much contradiction and confusion you could mistake it for absurdist performance art. Yeah, it's on that level. It is on the level of parody. This is a hidden gem. Dude, this guy is a hidden gem on YouTube. There are so many people who I think could get a lot of material out of making fun of this guy who don't know he exists. So hopefully I'll be one of the people to really me and Freda, we can bring this guy to light. Probably